are you going to go back to the Korean, overlords, the Korean Doomsday cult? And in that moment, I went back to the cult. And I remember uh, driving off, and I remember seeing my family just staring at me in the rearview mirror. I was just driving, and I remember seeing them in the rearview mirror, and just tears just started coming down my face.
Today, I'm here with Adam from Finding the Alternative. Adam is a YouTuber, an ex-cult member, and we're going to talk about that later. He's a cult YouTuber, and he actually knows a lot about the Jehovah's Witnesses as well. And he's been talking to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. He's going to talk about that soon. Um, we had a conversation recently on his channel. He interviewed me because he hit me up in my comment section, actually, and was really fun. Almost immediately we had a conversation with each other, and yeah, I was talking about my story. He wanted to do an interview about my story, and I left when I was 15 years old. That is a thing that I've been talking about, and you really got to check it out. It's really fun. It was a really a good conversation as well. And this is also why it's so important to like a video and to subscribe to a channel, because this is how we find each other. And this is how we find people that are resonating with us and people that are can become our friends, and we can have good conversations about, well, in this case, being ex-cult members. So, yeah, Adam, thank you so much for being here.
Of
I'm
course.
very happy that you could join me on my channel as well. And yeah, it's really good to see you. And well, can you introduce yourself? Can you tell me about who you are and what your channel is about and what you're doing there?
Yes, first off, thanks for having me. I appreciate our conversations. I appreciate you coming onto my channel and sharing your story, and I'm more than happy to be here to do the same. And thank you very much
Yeah.
for having me on here and for letting me share my story and a little bit about me. So, like you were saying, I run the YouTube channel. It's called Finding the Alternative, and the reason why it's called that is because people in cults often say, "Well, what's the alternative if I leave?" And so that's why my channel, it's a truth-seeking channel, finding the alternative, right? And you can't find the alternative if you're not ready to divorce the lie. You're not ready to find the truth if you're not willing to separate from the falsehood. So
Yeah.
that's the method behind my channel. Is we're a truth seeking channel where we invite both current and former members on to tell their side of the story, and then we let the facts speak for themselves. So far, every time I offer a current cult member to come on the channel, they've declined. But anyway, maybe one day we'll have somebody. As far as me personally, I was raised LDS till about 17 years old, and then I stepped away from that faith, and then I got picked up by a Korean doomsday cult known as the World Mission Society Church of God. I joined that one when I was about 19, um, and really, it was kind of a wild story, which I'll get into here. But essentially, what the WMSCOG is I would say it's a if you took the Seventh Day Adventists, you took the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you took the LDS, and you took the Moonies, and you put them together and made this Frankenstein of a theology of an organization, you'd basically come pretty close to what the Whimsicog believes. So that's basically my story in a nutshell, and that's kind of my channel. So
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing that already. So the Wimskog Church, the World Mission Society Church of God, is the name of the cult. Can you tell me about a little bit about their spiritual beliefs and what their spiritual leaders are like?
oh boy, this is gonna be an interesting one. So yeah, where to start with this? Okay. So, to put it simply, the World Mission Society Church of God believes that there was a Korean man who was born 1918 who was baptized 1948. And he started his own church in 1964 after getting kicked out of the Seventh day Adventist Church when he joined in 1948. So, he started his own church in 1964, called it the Church of God Jesus Witnesses, and then he started leading that church, and then eventually, around the 1980s, is when he started really writing what we would call truth books. Truth books would basically be very similar to what the Watchtower publishes.
Mm.
So that kind of material, it's from the head honchos. It's the stuff you need to read to be spiritually fed, spiritually enlightened. It's the
So
stuff you
their
need to
own lecture?
follow. Basically, it's basically he would for me to describe it. There is a restoration premise to this cult. It's like all the other churches are bad and we are the only
Oh.
true organization, right? And how we determine that is because his name is An Sang Hong, this Korean man that was born. They believe that he is the root of David, and the root of David's function is to basically come into the world and to reveal the truth that was lost. The method
Mm.
of how he reveals this lost truth of Christianity is through revealing certain things, certain prophecies, and certain teachings through what we would call truth books. He wrote a few of them, and they all have different names. One is called The Mystery of God, Spring of the Water of Life, Explanations of the Trinity, Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil in the Gospel, Visitors from the Angelic World, etc. All have different, all have different functions, but essentially it's his theology, and through understanding and reading his theology, you're able to comprehend the Bible, the secret teachings of the Bible, because they believe the Bible is sealed. And only this one man is able to unseal these teachings and reveal it to the world so that way everyone can have salvation. So he started writing these truth books, and then he passed away actually in 1985. Now, the WMSCOG believes that this passing away is according to prophecy, and these prophecies that they believe in basically deify Unsung Hong as not just like the Watchtower, who are God's chosen people or
Mm.
God's chosen the discreet and faithful slave. He's actually elevated more than that. He's not just a prophet. They actually believe he is a
Mm.
second coming Jesus.
Yeah.
And
All
he passed
right.
away in 1985. Now, after 1985, there's this Mother God character. Her name is Angil Ja. She's actually alive in South Korea right now. I believe she's 83 years old. And
Okay.
they believe that she is God the Mother walking in the flesh. So not only are you probably not familiar with the term God the Mother, but they
No.
don't just believe she's God the Mother. They believe that she is God the Mother who is actually here on the earth right now. And she is basically the face of the organization. And there's another character. His name is Kim Ju Chol. He's the general pastor. If you look up the WMSCOG in YouTube, you'll see his face. He does all the sermons, and he's basically what they call the general pastor. So I would say, according to the bylaws of the church, according to the reality, he is basically the head honcho, and then it's actually the mother god below him, to be honest. But in the members' eyes, mother is God. She is God the mother, and this general pastor is basically almost equal, I would say, in authority, and equal as far as you know him. Whatever he says is basically the word of God. Let me just put it that way.
Okay. Okay.
So he would be kind of like the governing body sort of elevation. Not quite God, but
Wow.
pretty close. So those
Yeah.
two, the general pastor and mother God, they are running the church currently. And they some of the things they preach about is number one, you had to believe in the deification of Ansung Hong, him being second coming Jesus. And you also have to believe that this Korean woman is God in the flesh. Now you might be asking, okay, well, what do they do? What is their salvation? What does their services look like? What is their thing? Like, what do I need to do to be saved? Well, it's
Yeah.
basically, to put it simply, it's a mixture of Christian tradition and Judaistic tradition. So they keep the Passover once a year, and they do it with
Oh,
bread and wine. So it's basically a communion. You know, they
yeah.
do it
Is
on the
it the
same
same as
day,
the memorial kind of like
same exact
that?
day, same exact day.
Oh, the same exact day. Okay.
Yeah. In
Wow.
in fact, when the Sansang Hong character left the Seventh Day Adventist Church to start his own because he wanted to keep the feast, that's his whole dogma is wanting to keep the feast.
Oh, okay.
He
Okay.
actually he actually asked the Jehovah's Witnesses what day the Passover was on. So he actually learned from the Jehovah's Witnesses how
Oh,
to
wow.
calculate the memorial, the Passover.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what is appealing for people, and maybe also for yourself, was in the Wimskog Church, for with a mother god? What is appealing for people about that?
Well, when you come from an LDS background, it's appealing to me because there is an unspoken teaching. When I mean unspoken, like it exists, but nobody really talks about it. That there is a God the Mother. There is a female deity because they, in Mormonism, they believe, in eternal families, and they also believe God has an eternal family. And they kind of
Yeah.
use, like life as an example, right? Like you can't have children without a mom, right? You need a mom and a dad in order to produce life. And the same thing that happens on earth is the same thing in heaven. And so the Mormons believe that we all have heavenly mother, right? That there's a heavenly mother that's
Yeah.
giving birth to
Yeah.
all these spirit babies. And the
Yes.
Mormons also believe that they will be elevated into godhood and that they will have a wife or many wives in some cases, and that they can produce their own offspring and basically be their own gods. And basically, the cycle just keeps repeating over and over and over again.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that's how I was raised, and that was my understanding. So to me, it wasn't too far fetched to believe in God the Mother because I was already accustomed
Yeah.
to such a teaching.
Yeah. I
And
totally understand that.
yeah. And so when they were talking to me about God the Mother and they were actually showing me, proof of this, and I say proof loosely because what all these cults do is they take one little verse completely out of context and write
Yeah. Yeah.
in their own context or their own understanding of it in order to push a narrative. And the LDS don't really do that with the God the Mother because, like I said, it's more of just something that they know, but it's not really taught. It's not really spoken
Okay.
about,
Okay.
you
Okay.
know?
So it exists, but it's really spoken about. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
because Jehovah's Witnesses aren't experiencing this, of course. This is kind of a new thing for me.
Yeah.
I've seen it in New Age spirituality before, because I've been in that as well for like 6 years. I've been doing that a lot,
Yeah.
and like, um, yeah, a lot of spiritual practice in that. And so then you also have like a mother god and a father
Yeah.
god that you could believe in, but it's very eclectic. So it's not very sure. Like everyone has their own path in that. It's never really a clear path.
Right.
Um, and you mentioned you were raised a Mormon.
Yes.
How important was religion for you growing up? Were you very involved, or was it something that was not very interesting for you? Can you tell me what it was like for you?
Well, it's kind of like being born and raised Jehovah's Witness, and because I've talked to a lot of ex Jehovah's Witnesses, some third or even fourth generation. It's very similar
Yeah,
with me. I am fifth or sixth generation Mormon. Um, my ancestors basically came across the plains and settled parts of Utah, which is in the USA.
yeah,
Um, and if you know the Mormon story, basically they were kicked out of Nauvoo, and then they came across the plains to establish and settle along the way. One of the main headquarters being Salt Lake City, Utah, with Brigham Young, who was a second prophet, and then the Mormons literally built Utah, the state of Utah,
yeah,
and that's where I was born and raised. And I have ancestry that they were the pioneers that carried the hand carts all the way across the desert and settled this place. So it wasn't really a religion to me. It was more of a community, more of a heritage, more of like it's in my blood, you know. So I had
yeah,
very deep
yeah.
roots when it comes to the Mormon faith, the Mormon religion. And I still go to church, to the Mormon church every now and then cuz my whole family's
Okay,
Mormon,
okay. Yeah, yeah. That's where you find the people that you love and would like to
yeah.
see on a regular
Yeah.
basis. Yeah,
Yeah,
I totally understand that. Yeah,
and I would say the LDS, they're not the kind of they used to be, kind of a crazy organization, right? With the
yeah,
polygamy and all that kind of stuff. And, they have skeletons in their closet. And to be clear, I don't adhere to the theology of the LDS church, but I do go because my family goes and I'm free in Christ to do so. I'm
of
not,
course.
you know, because with the WMSCOG, right, they're like everybody outside of our specific group of people are just evil, bad, and we can't go anywhere except our chosen place of worship, right? We called it Zion, you
Yeah,
guys called it Kingdom Hall. But,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I
That
still
sounds
go.
so similar.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I still went. I still go to the LDS church, even though I don't adhere to the theology. I don't believe in it. But I still go because my family goes and I like to support my family and I love my family. And I
yeah,
think it's pretty silly to cut off family and cut off friends just because they disagree on religion, you know.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. You
even
can
though
find a middle ground with them if you want
absolutely,
to, and if it's
absolutely.
possible, go for it. I'm absolutely for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, do I think my theology is accurate, believing in Jesus and Christ alone and faith alone? For sure. But I get it. It's me, though. Everybody else has their own journey, like you said. Everybody else has their own portion to where they have to figure it out. And so
Yeah.
the way I appreciate that is not being in a cult anymore where it's either our way or the highway. Well, it's like, well, because just like the Jehovah's Witness cult, the Whimscog cult, you know, everything you did was under surveillance, right? You could only listen to
Absolutely.
approved music. You could only read approved church material. You couldn't go online and actually research the history of the church or research anything about the church or listen to any ex members and what they had to go through.
Yeah.
It
Because they're
was
the apostates. Yeah.
exactly. We don't call
Yeah.
them apostates. We call them
No, no.
slanderers. That's what we
Okay.
would call them.
Okay. Okay. I'm glad I mentioned that. So now I know about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
great.
technically, I'm a
Okay.
slanderer, but I
You're
haven't
slender.
slandered
Yeah, I'm an
anybody.
apostate.
Yeah, and it's
And I'm
just
okay with it.
it's just like villainizing language just to scare the current members for not wanting to associate with us because they don't want, the higher ups, the suits, they don't want, the truth to get out. They don't want people to
Yeah.
honestly reflect on the religion.
Yeah. Exactly. And no, the Whimscog Church is also a control group.
Yes.
I'm getting into something that is maybe a little hard to talk about. A deeper thing that I want to talk about is you actually missed your dad's last birthday. Um,
Yes.
and um, can you tell me about what happened that got to this point?
Yeah, so for me to describe what happened, first I have to describe the theology of it just a little bit. Um
Okay.
Missing any, in these high control groups I always have these rules, these regulations, right? With Jehovah's Witnesses, they have their own, with Whimscog they have their own, etc. So with this one, like I said, it's a very Judaistic or Judaic, however you want to say it, way of salvation, but it's also has this weird Christian flavor to it. So they would keep what's called New Covenant feasts. And what
Mm,
they were is you would have to go to church on Saturday
okay.
and you go there from basically 8:30 a.m. and you don't walk out of that building typically until 10 p.m. Right? So you're there all day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a
And
lot of
then
time spent.
they also have a Tuesday worship, which that one's not terrible. It's only an hour and a half, then you go home. But they
Okay.
also keep what's called the seven feasts and three times. And, so you go there all day for those days. So like Passover, which is the memorial, you go there. And then you have to go there, for unleavened bread. And you have to go there for Resurrection Day. You have to go there for Ascension Day, Pentecost, um,
Okay.
Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and then first and last of Tabernacles. And so all your vacation days are basically wiped out every single year because you have to keep these feasts because these feasts land during the weekday. Um, and then on top of that, we had to go to early morning worship services for sometimes 7 and 10 days at a time. We have to go to the church
Okay.
at
Wow.
5 a.m. with our families and worship in
Whoa.
suits and ties and everything. It was for 7 or 10 days at a time.
Hmm. Whoa.
And
Okay.
so, and their theology is like it's very legalistic. So if you miss a day, like your. Is in jeopardy. And so your Saturdays were non-existent. Those were solely given to the church. You know, um, any feast days were solely given to the church too. You had to take off. You couldn't work. Couldn't really do anything on those days. And also too, we couldn't keep any of the quote unquote pagan holidays. So Christmas, Easter, Valentine's, all these pagan holidays were completely um, forbidden from you know doing anything. You could spend time with family, quote unquote, but you couldn't receive gift or participate in any of the
Yeah.
festivities, whether at school or with family or whatever the case is. So they're bearing on these rules is like if you miss these rules or you're not quite up to par, you're gonna basically be damned. You're gonna go to hell. Everything is on the threat of hell in this place, by the way. And so
Okay.
having that, I'll walk you through that story with my dad. So his
Okay.
last birthday was a Saturday, and his birthday party was during the time where we had to keep service. So naturally, he was in the hospital at that time. He had been in the hospital for quite a bit, and it was his birthday, and I wasn't able to go. Not because, and here's the thing, that's why I have to be careful because technically they didn't stop me, right? But cults don't
Okay.
have to stop you because you're conditioned to just obey. You're
Mm,
conditioned to
exactly.
put,
Yeah.
yeah, you're conditioned to put the organization and the people up top first, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
anyway, so obviously my salvation was at stake. I didn't want anything to happen, and so I opted out of my dad's birthday party because there's two reasons. Number one, I didn't want to miss a service because I was afraid that I would go to hell if I miss a service.
Yeah. Okay.
Then on top of that, they have this very unique way of pushing members to do more for the church, and that being is, you know, hey, if you serve the church more, you serve this organization more, God is going to go easy on your family, the unbelieving
Mm,
family.
yeah.
That what that means is it's subjective. That could mean they could come in later and be saved, or maybe God won't send them to hell, or maybe God won't destroy them at Armageddon or something like that. So they always dangle that carrot in
Nice.
front of you, basically saying like, "Hey, if you serve and do more for us, and don't really spend too much time with them, your family, God will bless them more. God will save them. God will
Wow.
protect them." You know,
That is so heavy. That is extremely heavy.
it's extremely heavy. And so
Yeah.
that is what spurred my decision to opt out of my father's birthday because in my mind, I'm like, well, God is in control of everything. If I do this and please God and not miss a service, he's going to thank me later, right? My
Yeah.
dad is going to thank
Yeah.
me later, whether it be in this world or the next. Come to find out, that happened a lot quicker than I thought it would because
Mm.
a few days later he passed away.
Wow. Wow. I'm
And
sorry that happened.
yeah, no, it was definitely a hard time. Um, because like with funerals and stuff, like it's so taboo in these kind of cults. Like they have no respect for the dead, in my opinion. They have no
Yeah.
respect for grieving family members at all, because it's just business as usual. Hey, you're gonna go preaching. Hey, you're gonna go, you know, serve the church. You need to clean this. You need to do that. You have duties at the church. It's just
Exactly. Yeah.
like it's just business as usual, right? Because
Yeah.
these kind of
Oftentimes
organizations make you
inhumane. Yeah. Not
not
being taken seriously.
not at all. And
Yeah.
your emotions, right? Because you're like they always tell you, well, this is God's true church. This is God's true organization. Like we can't have you frowning. We can't have you sad. We can't have you depressed, right? You have to have
Yeah.
smile all the time. You have to leave your sorrows outside of the church. You don't bring it in here because you'll hurt somebody's faith, or people
Yeah.
will think, this church isn't the right place for them or something like that, right? It's so image obsessed. And so so you can't grieve. You can't have any problems in the church, right? You can't talk about any problems. You can't have any problems. Um, to be fair, you can go to the leader, which is like the elder in Jehovah's Witnesses terms. It could be a
Exactly.
missionary or actual elder or pastor, but it's the same position as an elder in Jehovah's Witnesses, just different terminology.
Okay.
You could go to them and talk to them behind closed doors about something, which I did and I appreciated a lot. But a lot of times that stuff, even though you ask for it to be private, it doesn't stay private. It's very
Mm.
gossipy, and
Yeah.
a lot of people know about it that you probably don't want to know about it. So nothing really stays
Okay.
secret in that place. But with my dad's, passing away, I remember the reaction. Um, it was very nonchalant. You know, I
Okay.
was in tears calling my leader. I was like, "Hey," because I asked him to pray for my dad because I didn't know he was gone. And I asked him to pray, like, "Hey, my dad, he's kind of worse for wear. Like, hey, can you please pray for him? Can you please pray for him?" Um, and I remember too. Sorry, it's kind of coming back a little bit.
Yeah. That's okay.
And I,
I totally understand.
yeah, and I remember too, you know, calling him and being like, "Hey, missionary, so and so," it's like the elder, like he's gone, like, and I I just remember like there was really no emotion on the other end, and there was no like, "Oh, brother, I'm so sorry, like I'm so sorry," you know, there was really no emotion, no empathy, and what's crazy too is like this God the Mother character, you write letters to her.
Okay.
You when you have like this app. Before it used to just be the website, but anyway, they have this function where you can write letters to her. You know, And I remember
Okay.
writing a letter about this and asking if my dad could be saved and, what I could do and, you know, hoping that there'd be a response, but I never got a response on that, and so in my mind at that time, I was like, "Oh, I'm unworthy. I don't deserve my dad to be saved. I don't deserve anything." And this is kind of pretty common for cults like this is, they beat you down emotionally thinking you're not worth anything, thinking that you're not, you don't deserve anything nice. You don't deserve anything, you know, you don't deserve a good job. You don't deserve a good house. You don't deserve a good family.
Yeah,
Like just very self-destructive. And so
definitely.
I remember writing this letter like asking for my dad to be saved and this and that. And no response, obviously. But I was so brainwashed at the time because, I'd only been in for a couple of years. And so I was still in kind of like the honeymoon phase, what we call it.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just remember like, there was one brother who's actually out now. He's one of my best friends. His name's Eric. He was the
Okay.
only one that actually like came up to me and was like, dude, I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah.
I like my heart breaks for you. I'm so sorry about you and your family and this and that and the other. But and the funny thing is when he did that, I was like mad because, number one, I told the leader like not to tell anybody because I was trying to be like a good Christian. I was trying to be a good gospel worker. I was trying to be a good member of the church by not bringing my sorrows and hurting other people and like trying to just be, like the strong, big, because they don't want you to grieve. They don't want any emotion except just happy. They don't want
Yeah.
anybody to they don't want to see anybody crying or anybody just, depressed or anything like that because it reflects the church bad. And I remember saying like I just remember thinking in my head like why if I'm doing all this to please God, like why did this happen? Because I'm in God's true church, I'm in God's true organization. Like why did
Yeah.
this happen? And I can say that to, normal Christian churches too, like I'm not saying that's the basis of why I left,
No.
um,
Okay.
but when you believe, God is in the flesh in Korea who can at least call you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who has a capability of like calling you, has a capability of like writing you back an email or something
So
like
it's
that.
so she did write back and
Not at
actually
all.
received all the messages.
No,
No.
no, I never received anything. You never receive
Oh.
anything. I've never ever gotten anything. And
Oh.
the
Whoa.
crazy thing is too is, they'll say she prays for you day and night on her knees by name. Well, where
So
was
they just
that?
tell you that. Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
tell you that. And what's funny is because people actually go visit her in Korea. Like you go to their
Hmm.
website and you'll see tons of
Okay.
visiting trips of people from all over the world visiting her.
Yeah.
The funny
Okay.
thing is they all need name tags. And so
Oh.
in my mind, I'm like, well, if you pray for me day and night and you know my sorrows, you know all this stuff about me because you're God.
Yeah.
Why didn't you give me any empathy? Why didn't you give me any sort of condolences or some sort of anything? And on top of
Yeah.
that, like, why is it that when we have to go visit you, which I never did, but I was in for 10 years, and they say, well, you have to be
So.
summoned, right? Because she's Ark of the Covenant. You have to be summoned because if you aren't summoned, you're going to be destroyed. Basically, that's what they would
Hmm.
say. And I
Oh
remember
man.
thinking, like, well, why do we need name tags if she prays for me day and night on her
Yeah.
knees with tears?
Yeah.
Like, but when you're brainwashed, you're just like, whatever. You don't see those things.
Exactly. You're part of the whole, and you're brainwashed. Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
know anything else. Yeah.
And I don't
Um.
blame any of the leaders for not having empathy because in that place, you're not allowed to have empathy. I don't hold anything against anyone because in that place, you become a psychopath. You don't have any empathy, right? You don't have any empathy towards like anyone because it's just you're trying to fake happiness all the time. And when you do that
Yeah.
so much, you forget to actually have emotions. So I don't blame anybody.
Yeah. You also mentioned to me that your wife was in labor. I think it was of your second child.
Yes.
Um, and you weren't allowed to be with her. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. It was really hard. And, my wife was put through a lot in this place as far as like being a woman, being a mom, kids were put a lot through this place as well, but we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. But to answer your question
Yeah.
and get into that story, it's kind of the same premise as why I missed my dad's birthday, because you're taught that you need to do God's will first, serve the organization first, and then magically everything else will just happen,
Fall into place.
fall into place, and everything will just be perfect, la di da. But you got to do God's will first, serve the organization first. And so that's essentially what happened here because my wife was having contractions and it was around 2 or 3 in the morning. We took her to the hospital because my middle child was just about to be born. And this was during the prayer week. Remember the 7 or 10 early morning worship services that we had to go to that were mandatory? This
Okay.
happened just before one of those prayer meetings. And I remember it was like 3:30, then it turned into 4:30, or sorry, it turned into 3:30, turned into 4, turned into 4:30. And I was like, oh man, like I gotta, we either gotta not go to the church and stay here, prepare for the worship service, or we gotta figure out something. So I call my elder in Jehovah's Witness terms, and I was like,
Okay.
hey, my wife is having contractions. What do I do? Can I stay here with her? And he's like, no, you have to come to the church, brother. And I was like, wait, but what is she gonna do? And
Yeah.
then he's like, well, she can keep personal service. She can keep personal worship, but you have to come to the church.
Oh my God.
And so without a second thought, I was just like, okay. So I took my 1.5 year old at that time and went and told my wife, like, hey, they said I couldn't stay with you. They said that you could stay and just put on your veil, which they mandatory veil wearing in the church. If you're a woman, you have to put on a veil every time you worship or
Okay.
pray or anything like that. But
Okay. Yeah.
so she had her veil and she had to basically, while she was in labor pains, she had to read a book, right, which is written by either the general pastor or An Sang Hong. She had to pray and read and sing like songs while she's in labor to keep the worship service. And then I had to go to the church with our daughter and keep worship, hoping that I don't miss the birth of our child. And
Oh.
and yet this organization has the nerve to say they don't separate family. And the
Well,
funny thing
they do.
is they do, absolutely, because as soon as you
Oh my
walk into this
God.
place, I guarantee you, as soon as you walk into this place, and maybe I won't say guarantee because it's been a year and a half since I left and they watched my videos, so hopefully they've changed by now, but based on my knowledge, if you walk into a WMSCOG organization, you will find that there's male and female separated. Children are separated from the
Oh.
adults. They don't worship together.
Whoa.
It's male on one side and female on the other, and the children are somewhere else. So you're never sitting next to your spouse or your children ever.
Whoa.
In fact, even though we go to the same building, there's times I wouldn't see my kids or my wife the whole day until we left.
Wow. Yeah, also because of the long hours, of course.
Yeah,
But I want to get into something else, and that's the doomsday beliefs within the Whimscog. And for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's Armageddon.
yeah,
Um, People that are not baptized, people that are not part of Jehovah's Witnesses will be killed in a gruesome way. And they're telling the stories in all details. Um, and with the Whimscog Church, that's the same type of thing, right? That's what you told me
yeah,
as well. Can you tell me what they see, what it looks like, the end of the world? Is it coming very soon, or is it something that is coming like I don't know,
yeah,
somewhere in the near future, but or a certain date maybe?
yeah. So they basically believe that Armageddon is imminent. It has been imminent for some time. And they've had a few failed doomsday prophecies. At first, they said 1988. That
Mm,
didn't happen. Then they said 1999. That didn't happen. Then they said 2012. That didn't happen. And so they're
okay.
they're always looking for the next thing to like pin. Like I remember it was the year of Jubilee, right? 2014. They said it was going to end, but they weren't as brazen about it. But they always look for something,
Okay.
right? Hey, this
Yeah.
prophecy is about to be fulfilled. It's going to be the end, right? When COVID happened, they're like, oh, this is the end. This is the end. And then they walk that back.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
2022 is the Ukraine and Russian war. Oh, this is the end. This is the end. 2017, it was Kim Jong Un. Like he's going to destroy the world, et cetera, et cetera. And then, with 2021, um, it was Hamas and Israel. And
Yeah.
now I'm sure it's, Iran and the US. Like there's always
Yeah.
something to
Yeah. So these
scare
big
the crap out of the
worldly
members.
events, this is
Yeah.
going to be the end because this is a big world event happening right now. It's in the
Yeah.
media, big
Hmm.
media thing. Yeah, I get it. I understand it as well. I know of it as well as a Joe's Witness. I've heard about these things as well, but it didn't really bother me that much. And I'm going to talk about it in the interview that we had together on your channel as well.
Yeah.
Um, Hell is also part of the WMSCOG. And with Jehovah's Witnesses, that's not necessarily a thing. They believe that there's not going to be anything, or people that are Jehovah's Witnesses will find back their loved ones because they're going to be resurrected after death and they were going to live in paradise together forever. And also the 144,000 people. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that later. Um, but with the Whimsicott Church, do believe in hell as well. Can you tell me what they say it looks like, hell?
Yeah. And let me just follow up because you said, what does Armageddon look like? So let me cover that
Okay.
first and then I'll get into the hell.
Yeah.
How they describe the Armageddon is nuclear war. Everyone's going to be incinerated. That's not in their Zion. That's not keeping their version of Passover. And they basically give you a visual of your flesh will rot while you're standing, your eyes will rot in their sockets, and your tongue will rot in your mouth.
Oh,
Um,
that's
and they'll
awful.
also say, even though you are saved, so if you are in Zion, their place of worship, and you have kept the Passover, they'll say you'll actually have to watch that happen. So you're going to have to watch your loved ones that
Oh
aren't
no.
in the organization basically be incinerated before your eyes and rot away before your very
Oh,
eyes, but you're going to be happy about it somehow because it's not you,
oh,
I guess.
yeah, I
And
totally
as
understand, but that's awful.
yeah, it's
Awful.
horrific. And they even pray for that kind of stuff. I remember preaching with one gal. It was when the war happened for Ukraine and Russia, and she was like, "Well, I hope the nukes go off soon, and if not, can I just press the red button?" You know, and even being brainwashed, I was like, "That's pretty sinister because you're basically asking for the death of billions of people."
Hmm. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
reason why they ask for that is because it puts an end to what they have to do, right? It's the end of preaching. It's the end of having to keep these god awful services, having to go to this church, having to do all the things this church makes you do. That's the end of it, right? When Armageddon comes, that's
Yeah.
the end of it. And they're willing, and that's how miserable they are, and that's how miserable it is being in there because I saw that and I remember people saying that all the time, man, I wish the nukes would just be released. I just wish this would be over, because it's absolutely miserable, and
Yeah.
they think that
Yeah.
there's a utopia on the other side when there won't be. um, and so that's their version of Armageddon, and that's how you know they make you psychotic, they make you psychopathic because you're literally just like my suffering is so much. I'd rather 8 billion people perish so that way I don't have to do this anymore. That's
Yeah.
their good news. That's their gospel. Um, as far as hell is concerned, they always show images of like, hey, if you disobey us, if you walk away from this place, if you speak out against us, or you do any number of things we don't want you to do, the end result is hell. If you miss a service, if you don't preach enough, if you don't smile enough, if you don't do anything enough, you're going to burn in hell forever. And they'll show you images of people burning in hell, and
Oh.
they'll show the kids images of people burning in hell to scare them. You know,
Whoa.
they even made their leaders watch it's like a YouTube video. I think it's from some church in Korea. I don't remember the name, but it was paintings of hell from one of a church members. It wasn't the Whimscog, it was a different church. They had a
Okay.
member
Okay.
paint pictures of what hell looked like.
Oh,
But the
whoa.
Whimscog showed this to their leadership, their members, and basically is the most horrific, inhumane, grotesque images of hell that you could ever imagine. It was like, women were being stabbed by demons in their private parts, and men were having their private parts like sliced off by demons, and babies were
Oh,
being, I don't even want to say, like, by
no.
demons, and you know, and they were showing this to the members to scare them. When clearly, in any way, shape, or form, anyone with a normal brain can be like, whoever that individual is that's painting these has a mental illness who should probably
Oh,
go get help. Very demonic, and just, even not a even it's not
definitely.
even a biblical depiction at all. It's not a Christian depiction. It's not any depiction. It's basically mental
No,
illness on display, but they're using it to scare people, right? And after,
absolutely.
they'll just be like, well, let's not go to hell, when that's not even a depiction of hell in any way, shape, or form in scripture. It's literally someone's mental illness on display with paint, but
Yeah,
never waste an opportunity, so
exactly. For fear mongering.
yeah, they're very heavy-handed when it comes to hell. They're very heavy-handed when it comes to showing depictions of hell, because any way they can scare the crap out of members from, who maybe are slowing down, not doing exactly what they want, or maybe might leave, or maybe might speak out if they leave. they
Yeah,
they make you so terrified of even having a thought against the leadership, where they do, like thought stopping, like, hey, this isn't right, this is going against my conscience. Oh, get out of there, get out of, nope, nope, this
yeah,
is the true
yeah,
organization, the true church, I just need to do it.
yeah. Pushing it away.
Yeah, and I've
Yeah,
felt that firsthand, the thought stopping. It's absolutely diabolical.
yeah. I totally understand. I don't know exactly how it is because I wasn't in the WMSCOG, but it's very similar to what I've been experiencing. And
Yeah,
what is also similar is the 144,000 people.
yeah,
Jehovah's Witnesses believe in that 144,000 people are coming with Jehovah to rule with him. The chosen people that are going to rule with him in heaven. But the Whimsicott Church has a similar type of idea of that, but I don't know how
that's
similar it
exactly.
is. So I want to ask you the
Yeah,
exact same.
I mean, I would say, as far as the premise, it's basically the same. Of course, there's little tiny differences here and there. So, for instance, one of the differences would be, how is the elect determined, right? Um, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, they actually have a way. I mean, it's a pretty loose way, but at least they have a way to determine who is elect and who isn't, which would be, taking the memorial, right? And then those
Exactly.
that aren't
Yeah.
would be abstaining from the memorial.
Yep.
Um, However, in Whimscog, nobody knows who the elect are. There's no sign.
Oh.
You know, there's no sign of who is the elect. Um, Basically, you'll know who the elect is when Armageddon hits, because if you're still alive, it means you're elect. If you're dead, it means you're not. That's the only way they can determine who the elect are. And how does one become the elect, you might ask? Well, there are a few criteria, but everybody does this. This doesn't separate the great multitude from the elect, but the elect must at least do this. It is keeping all the rules and regulations of the Whimsicog, which there's a whole list of
Hmm.
things, and which is like keeping the Sabbath, keeping the Passover, all these feasts, and doing preaching and bearing fruit and all these kind of things. Which
Yeah.
ironic. The ironic thing is the only criteria of being the 144,000 in the actual scripture is being a Jew and also not having a lie in your mouth, which the Whimsicog does not fit in any way, shape, or form. But nevertheless, that is how they view the 144,000, as doing all of their rules and regulations. But at the same time, even the great multitude still does that. So there is really no way to tell until Armageddon, where it's like, hey, you didn't die. Well, then you're the elect. Congratulations. But in a weird way, they'll tell you, like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about being the elect. Just do the gospel work,
Hmm.
right? And they'll say, like, hey, come keep the Passover. Passover protects you from the disasters, right? Passover protect you from Armageddon and World War III, and they'll scare the crap out of you when you're talking to them, like, hey, yeah, World War III is coming. Have you kept Passover? You know what Passover is? It protects you from Armageddon. You don't, you want to do that? And of course, no one in the right mind is like, no. But the thing is, though, is only 144,000 escaped death, and they have 4 million
Only.
members.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
what I always think about. Why only 144,000? And why do you believe that you are one in your congregation in this case with Jehovah's Witnesses? Um, is there are people within the congregation there that are part of the 104 only 144,000?
yeah. But in this case, you don't know, right? Because
Yeah,
they'll even say like, well, if you think you're 144,000, you're probably not, because 144,000 isn't worried about being the 144,000. They're just going to work. They're just going to do what they need to do, you know? Um,
yeah.
and what's crazy too is like, there's no guarantee, because even if you feel, or let's say you are predestined to be 144,000, let's say, they're like, well, you could still lose your spot, if you
Oh,
don't do enough. So it's not secure in any way, shape, or
oh.
form. It's a rat race, and it's a
Uh,
very vicious rat race.
can I ask you, have you ever thought you were one of the 144,000 at one point within the
Never,
WMSCOG?
because the bar is always too high. In
Okay.
fact, it's pretty devious, because I remember when there was higher up leaders that would leave the organization, I used to be happy about it, because, not that I was thinking about them going to hell, which that's what they told us was going to happen, but it was because,
Yeah.
hey, the bar has been lowered for 144,000, a spot opened up, and it's
Yeah.
just very sinister and very just depraved thinking.
Yeah.
They used to teach, at least when Ansang Hong, this Christ, was alive. And I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. I could spend hours talking about him, but
Yeah.
weirdly enough, they don't. I say this with the grain of salt, because if you ask the WMSCOG member if they believe in Ansang Hong as second coming Jesus, they will say they do. But in reality, they are not allowed to read his original books. They're not, because the WMSCOG, the books that they gave us, and this is kind of my exit story, is they actually removed whole chapters and passages of his books that
Oh.
the members are not allowed to read.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So they
And
they they acted like there was nothing ever happened of
yeah,
some sort, nothing like that.
yeah. And
That's crazy.
the original teaching was only 144,000 would be saved. But then when the church grew to 144,000, they're like, oh crap, we need something else, because we're growing past 144,000. So you can kind of see there's this morphology of theology over the course of time. So if you actually look at the original teachings of Ansang Hong, their second coming Jesus, it's way different than what the WMSCOG actually teaches. In fact, the crazy thing is
No.
how brainwashed we are is Ansang Hong wrote a book against the idea of God the Mother.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, so he wrote a book against the idea of God the Mother, but then after he died, this Zongil Ja character came into play and proclaimed herself as God the Mother. But he wrote a book against God the Mother, and you're not allowed to read it. They'll show it to you, but they'll show it to you basically like heavily redacted, and they'll make up
Okay.
excuses as to why the
Yeah.
book exists, but you're not allowed to read that book on your own. You're not allowed to read his
Okay.
original books on your own. You have to go to the approved leader, and the approved leader has to show you, redacted versions and explanations and that, but you're not allowed to read them on your own.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Very controlling and
Absolutely.
covering up, putting sand over everything, but it's boiling in the underground, it's
Yeah.
boiling actually in their own hell.
Yeah.
um, yeah, awful. Um, and the Whimsicott Church is also known for their volunteer work. I have checked out their website for a little bit. And I've seen people helping with earthquakes, earthquake survivors. I saw a group of people with colorful clothes on helping. They're often in groups, um, but oftentimes if people are volunteering, and they're also giving blood, by the way, also you see that in groups all the time,
Yeah.
and food drives. You've been talking about that as well. Um, but oftentimes with volunteer work and people doing a lot of volunteer work, they want to cover things up, or they want to prove something to themselves or other people. And Whimsicott Church also did that. Can you tell me about what they were trying to prove to the world?
Yeah, and don't be fooled. They haven't always done, volunteer services because as a cult functions, you'll see this whether Jehovah's Witness, whether you'll see it in WMSCOG or any other organization that is a cult.
Yeah,
They're very reactive because they're about survival. They will abandon their core teaching, which is the reason why I left. They will abandon a core teaching if it means growth, if it means revenue, if it
yeah,
means survival. This is just one of those things, right? They were called out for not because back in the day, it was like, hey, we don't have time. The world's going to end. The world's going to be destroyed. Why on earth would we do a cleanup? Why on earth would we get blood? Why on earth would we do anything? The world's going to be destroyed. No, we need to teach people these theology. We need to show people the Passover. We need to show people these things. That's going to really help them,
yeah, yeah.
indoctrinate them with our
Exactly.
theology.
Yeah,
That's what's really going to save
absolutely.
them and make their life better. But then they started getting called out on it and being like, hey, all these other churches, even cults, are doing volunteer services. Why don't you? Then all of a sudden, oh, we have We Love You Foundation, all these different initiatives and all these different,
Oh,
memorandum of understandings. Now we're with the
yeah,
United Nations, even though before we're like, we don't want anything to do with the United Nations. Now we're like with all these different, politicians and stuff like that. But before it was more just like, hey, we need to keep the Passover. We need to keep these feasts. Like, we don't have time. We don't even care. Like, the world's going to be destroyed. But then, as backlash happens, they're like, oh, wait, no, look, we're not bad. We're not evil. We're not a cult. Like, look what we're doing with our hands,
yeah.
look over here.
We're helping. We are in the
But
world, actually.
yeah, but to be completely fair, they do, and this is where I get a lot of flack because they do a lot
Okay.
of good work. And I appreciate the work that they do. They
Yeah.
donate a lot of blood. They do a lot of cleanups. They do a lot of disaster relief. And I'm totally here for it. I will never say a bad word about anybody doing volunteer services because it is needed. It is a very thankless work, to be completely honest. And we do
Yeah.
need people doing
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely
Absolutely.
not
I
hating
agree.
on any organization that is doing good work. Your work is great. Your work is amazing, especially WMSCOG. Their volunteer services is great. What I don't like about it is how they use that as leverage. When if you want to help somebody, just help somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
don't need to blast it all over YouTube. You don't need to blast it all over the news. You don't need to have politicians signing off awards for it
Yeah.
because they claim to be Bible based, right? They claim to be, we are the original true church. Well, what did Jesus say about don't let the other hand know what it's doing when you're giving to the poor? Don't announce you're giving
Exactly.
to trumpets. You're a hypocrite if you do so. But they're like,
Yeah.
we're the original church that Jesus established, but yet I remember we were trying to set up a cleanup on, just like a walkway. And I remember
Okay.
there was some discussion if we were going to do it or not because we weren't sure if the news was coming, right? And so we showed up. I think we said, well, we're still going to do it, but there was this hesitation of we may or may not do it because the news isn't going to come, and it's like if the news doesn't come, what's the point? We're not going to glorify God, right?
Yeah.
And thankfully, we were sitting there, we're kind of waiting, seeing what happens, and then the news card comes up. Okay, everyone get to work.
Yeah.
Um, and that is the mentality. I was there, and I remember we would spend so much time filming ourselves, drones.
Oh.
We would spend so much time taking pictures and getting the
Oh.
right angle, the right lighting. And towards the end, I was like, this is a farce. This is like, don't I mean, again, it's hard to talk about this because yes, the work is needed, the work is great, and it's
Yeah.
awesome, but you can't deny the underlying premise. And I'll explain. I'm actually going to do a video about this on my channel. But there was
Okay.
an ex-member who, she had donated blood, right? This was a blood drive. She had donated blood for
Yeah.
years at this organization. She left a few months ago. Really good friend of ours. We were actually just down at her house in Utah a few days ago.
Okay.
She signed up because she saw that they were doing a blood drive, and that's where she was used to doing it.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to start stuff. She wanted to show her kids, hey, even though we don't agree anymore, even though we think this is a bad church and we don't think what they're doing is right, we can put that behind us and we can do good work for the good of humanity and just put our differences aside and do what's good, and
Yeah.
be adults about this. So she signed up. She was going to have some of her friends signed up and go to the organization to donate blood. Again, not to start stuff, because if she did go there to start stuff and to like
Yeah.
mess up their blood drive or whatever the case is, that's not a good thing, right? And I don't condone that in any way, shape, or form.
No.
But that was not her intention. Her intention was to go there and to put the differences aside for the greater good, to
Yeah.
donate, because many people might ask, well, why didn't she just go to another place? Because the point was to put differences aside and do good
Yeah.
work, to be human, to be an adult about this situation.
Yeah.
So
So it
she
was
put
a
in,
lesson.
yeah, yeah. And it was to show her kids, like, hey, just because we don't agree anymore with theology or religion, we can still be friends and be cordial and be humans, put our
Yeah.
differences aside. That was the
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
But so she signed up, and the elder, the leader, reached out to her and said, basically, we don't want you on our property. Don't come. And one pint saves
Wow.
3 lives, and they say that all the time, but apparently not. They don't want that, because a simple difference of she used to be a member, now she is not a member. And her whole point of doing it was to show I can put my differences aside and we can work together still. And again, if she went there and she caused a ruckus and tried to disrupt them, I condemn that totally. And I think that's not a good idea. And I don't think that's helpful in any way, shape, or form. It's not
No.
conducive to any cause, whether it be anti cult or for the organization.
Yeah.
But the premise is they say they're not a cult, they don't act like a cult. But can you think of anything more culty than acting that way? You're
Yeah.
refusing a blood donation when there's a blood shortage just because someone doesn't agree with you anymore. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah, that is
But
total manipulation.
yeah, and I even went back to the cult myself and I stood outside. I wasn't on their property because they told me not to come on their property, and I respect that.
Yeah.
But we did a demonstration outside their church, and I just asked people to come have a conversation with me. And they boarded up, and they didn't board up. They closed the blinds and basically like, "Hey, everyone stay here. There's protesters outside, and we don't want you to be, attacked or something like that." Like they said some really weird stuff. We're just like five people
Mm.
holding signs like we're not going to hurt anybody, we're not going to attack anybody. Like we're just there to
No,
have a
no.
conversation, literally.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they have to have the demonization. They have to build they have to make it a big deal when it's really not.
Yeah.
That video is actually on my channel too if you want to check that out. But the point is they call themselves not a cult, but when you hold their feet to the fire, they do the most culty thing imaginable every time.
Okay.
Every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And getting into donations, WMSCOG also are working with a donation system, as far as I know. Um, were you free to give donations to the church, or were you forced to do so?
So I would say coerced, right? They don't really force you, but they
Okay.
also don't say don't. So I would say it's very heavily implied and very heavily coerced. And the most prime example I can think of is, I believe it was the year 2021. And remember, Passover is like their saving feast. It's a memorial, right? But everybody takes it because they think that is their
Okay.
salvation, right? This is their
Yeah.
ticket to heaven, right? And so you don't not show up for the memorial, right? You don't not show up for the Passover either.
Hmm. Yeah.
And one year in 2021, there was an announcement to leaders only that if you didn't tithe, you would not be able to keep the Passover that year.
Hmm.
And again, if you're not able to keep Passover, it means damnation. It means hell, you know. So it's a very big deal. But yet they have the audacity to say, "Hey, come to our church and receive the free gift of the water of life." Right? Um, they charge 10%. That's a tithe, right? Then they also command offering, as far as there's a blue envelope, brown envelope. If there's construction, if there's cooking needs, if there's food and if there's supplies, if there's anything needed, members fork it up and they're asked for it.
Yeah.
So there is free will donations to where they won't, like if you can't, they won't make you per se, but everything else is tied to your salvation. And I would say they're like, well, what does God say? God says that, you know, put your treasures in heaven because there your heart will be also. And where's your money here? It's basically like a spiritual savings account, and the more you put into the
Okay.
treasure in heaven, the more you'll be able to cash in later, so it's like we'll think of it as like a heavenly investment fund, and so naturally when you have that in mind and you also know if I don't do it, I'm not going to be blessed, I'm going to be cursed and damned eternally,
Yeah.
it's, I would say, it's coerced, because um like you don't want damnation and you want blessings, right? You want that, you want God to not curse you and you want God to bless you. And so I'd say it's very much, you know, coerced, and there's very heavily monetary donations because I know so many people that had
Mm.
such good jobs in there, but they were still broke all the time because they were just constantly
Yeah.
giving to the church. And don't
Wow.
mishear me. Like, I'm not saying don't give to your local churches. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm preaching here. But to command it and demand it on the basis of salvation and not taking into consideration the person's welfare financially,
Yeah.
that is where I have an issue, right? If you
That
have a
is not
local
good.
church, if you have a local church and you want to give as much as you want, go for it. God bless.
Of
I'm
course.
sure
And
the
if you
church loves.
can miss it.
But if you can't, but yet your leader is saying, "Hey, if you don't, you're going to go to hell." Like, I remember there was a time, there was a few members who lost their jobs, who didn't have a job, and they were still
Mm.
commanded to tithe. I know there was
Yeah.
I know there was people who they were a member, but they had unbelieving children or unbelieving spouses, but they were demanded to
Oh.
tithe on behalf of them. Like,
Ooh.
I had to tithe on behalf of my kids. I had 3 kids, and I had to tithe for them. You
Oh,
know,
yeah. Yeah.
so they do have. I would say they do have a system of squeezing everybody for as much as they possibly can.
Yeah.
Um, and of course they'll say, "Well, it's voluntary, it's free will." But when you say you can't keep Passover because you haven't donated or you haven't tithed, I wouldn't say that's free will, because you're essentially
No.
threatening with eternal damnation. I don't see any free will in that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see any free will in that.
No. Were you struggling financially because of having to give this high amount of money to the church?
Everyone, everyone's struggling financially in there. Everybody. I mean, I would buy houses, and when I would sell the houses, I would write them a really fat check of 10% of my sale. You know,
Oh, whoa.
because it's
Yeah.
tithe. Like, you had to tithe off gift cards, right? Some people would have to, like, I didn't hear of that. I didn't do this personally, but I knew there was people that gave food stamps, you know,
Oh, oh,
um,
wow. Well, they needed it themselves.
and they gave some of it to the church because that's what they're taught.
Yeah.
So everybody there is struggling, and the church wants a part of the pie, regardless of how small it is. If you don't even have a pie, you won't have a crumb. They want part of the crumb.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like, I'm still paying off quite a bit of credit card debt because, again, you have to give check or you have to give cash for
Okay.
this tithe,
Okay.
for this offering. There is
Yeah.
no paper trail as far as like credit card, Venmo, anything like that. When it comes to
Okay.
tithe and offering, it's always check, it's always cash.
Yeah. It's also easier because then they don't have to write it down for the taxes and stuff.
Which is crazy
They
because
can
it's a
they can
nonprofit. You
earn
don't even have to
more.
do it anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but
So
is that a
strange.
red flag? I kind of think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Well, I
afraid of the
think so
paper
too.
trail. Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to ask you about something you mentioned actually in our conversation. Um, Arranged marriages within the Whimsicog Church is a
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
It's still a thing,
have you
even though they deny it.
experienced that?
Thank goodness I did not. My wife was actually the one that brought me in, and we married in the cult. So I wasn't arranged. I wouldn't say I was arranged at all. But I know a few people that were, and it ended miserably for them. It ended in divorce. So I have a good friend, Mitch, who he runs the channel Cult Audit. I was never personally in an arranged marriage, but I know tons of people who were, and
Okay. Wow.
I would say most of them ended in divorce. and it was a very horrendous divorce. I know a good friend of mine, Quincy, who I also interviewed on my channel.
Okay.
He left the church and then he ended up getting a divorce. Anthony, he's on the East Coast of USA. He also left the church and it resulted in a divorce. Mitch, my friend from Cult Audit, who if you haven't checked out Cult Audit, he's got some really cool videos on Jehovah's Witnesses and FLDS and
Nice.
WMSCOG stuff as well. So if you want to check him out, but um,
Yeah, I will.
he's actually going through a divorce right now. His Korean wife up and just left him in the middle of the night. No text, no goodbye, no
Whoa.
nothing, and just
Awful.
ran off to the church. Whether the church came and got her or she got there somehow, we don't know. Um, all Mitch knew is he went to his parents' house. His wife, while he was there, left, didn't even take most of her stuff, but just took like a handful of stuff basically. And then a couple days later, he was served papers, and the church basically put a restraining order on him, and which is kind of wild because he's not a violent person at all. He's a very cool, very honest, very humble person. Um, but they put a restraining order on him because I think the church wanted to just be like, "Oh, look, see, we had to put a restraining order on him. Like he's bad news." It's just another way to drag us through the mud. Any way they can, they drag us through the mud, especially if you're outspoken and you talk about this organization. Um, and so Mitch is going through a divorce right now, and he's trying to get that all done, trying to get that all finalized, and I'm sure he's going to make a video about it too. So I don't want to tell too much. It's kind of
Yeah.
his story to tell as far as details and whatnot. But
Yeah.
he thought his wife was spying on him, spying on his phone.
Mm.
Um, there's just a lot of crazy stories with arranged marriages, and it still happens, even though they deny it. It still happens. There's a
Okay.
Korean man or woman that'll come for 3 months, right? And they'll be here for 3 months, and then pretty soon, all of a sudden, they get hitched to some American, you know.
Oh,
And you'll notice that if you go to a WMSCOG, like a main church, I bet you 8 or 9 times out of 10, you're gonna see a Korean spouse to the leader, you know.
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which is
I
kind of understandable as well, but
yeah,
yeah,
and I
because of
honestly
its
think it's
origin.
the yeah. And what's funny is these relationships are quote unquote put together by God, but most of them end in horrific divorces,
Yeah,
um,
awful.
and
Terrible.
which is kind of ironic because this god the mother was also divorced, by her spouse.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, but yeah, so that's kind of all I know. I was never involved in it, but I know plenty of people that were arranged. I know, and I'll be fair, in some cases they're still together and they left, and they live life and they're happy together and it worked, which is
Yeah. That can
amazing. I
also
mean,
be a thing.
yeah, also, and
Yeah.
and of course, I don't wish anybody to get a horrific divorce either. So, like, don't misunderstand my words. Like, I hope it works out. If you get arranged, I hope it works out, and I hope you're in
Of
love, and I hope you
course.
have the best life, and you're healthy, and
Yeah.
I hope
That
it
would be
even
great.
yeah, and I hope and it does happen too. Sometimes people do leave with their spouses, even if they were arranged. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
It's a win-win then,
in that
but
case,
not for
yes.
the, yeah, but not for the church
No,
in that
not for the
case.
church. That yeah, in
No.
that case, it's a lose lose, which I'm okay with sometimes.
Yeah. Totally understandable. I want to get into you found out about the church's past at some point and you were leaving.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how that went a little bit?
Yeah, so essentially, we were in for 10 years and towards the end we just felt like something was off. Like when you have that feeling like just something is off, you can't exactly pinpoint it. You can't exactly say what it is, but you just have it and you just feel it and you just know something that you're doing is just off, right? And
Yeah.
so my wife felt that more than I was at that time. And my wife basically was like, "Look, something's off here. Maybe because we were used to the Whimsicog changing things on us because you know they would have these prophecies where they would say like, well, this is like for stronger members, right? This is for members whose faith is really strong. Meaning it's a pretty wonky prophecy, so you have to be pretty indoctrinated to understand it, and to
Yeah.
believe it and to believe their explanation of it. And so you had like these secret educations that only certain members could stomach, right? And so she was like, well, maybe it is just 104,000 that are saved and they're just not telling us because they don't want to scare us or something. And so in her mind, she's like, I want to
Oh,
read the original truth books because maybe, you know, because they do get translated from Korean to English. Maybe there was something left out unintentionally. And maybe it is 104,000. We just got to stick this out and be saved, you know? So she had it in her heart not to find anything wrong, not to find anything bad or false. And so she wanted to find the original book and she found it and she's like, oh, that's odd. I've never seen this book before, but it says the same words, right? It's the same title, just different, looks differently.
yeah,
And once she confirmed that it was his original book, An Sung Hong's original book, she's like, why is there 3 extra chapters in this book? You know, and remember, this is a big deal because this is God. This isn't like governing body. This is like God who wrote this. God, the same God who created the heavens and the earth, who parted the Red Sea, who died on the cross. This is the same God who wrote this in our eyes, you know? And we're like, that's odd. You know, there is 3 extra chapters of this book. And that's what started the whole thing. That was like the spark. That was a spark that really woke us up. But even though you have a spark, sometimes you don't leave immediately, you know. After we found that spark, we started seeing a lot of, started waking up to a lot of red flags. It was my wife mostly. She started seeing like, okay, the church even, the WMSCOG confirmed that they indeed did remove 3 chapters. They actually confessed to it. And after that point, my wife was kind of just done with them, like, okay, they lied.
yeah.
This isn't God's church. Like it was pretty quick for her, right?
Okay,
To understand what
okay.
happened. Me, on the
Yeah,
other hand, I was fighting for it to be true. It wasn't in my best interest. And contrary to what people say about apostates or slanderers, they're like, you just didn't want to, you just couldn't hold the mantle. You just couldn't rise up to the occasion. You just didn't want to believe in the first place, which is so dumb. And I'm sorry, but if you say stuff about ex members like that, your IQ is very low.
yeah,
Why on earth would I
yeah,
spend 10 years preaching, keeping every service, paying all this money if I didn't care, if I didn't really believe? Like, if you really believe that I didn't believe, you need to get your IQ checked. I'm sorry, because that
yeah,
is not how it works. Nobody fakes that. Nobody fakes the missing, my dad's birthday or me not being there for my wife if I didn't really believe it. So the people that say that just show that they're not very smart people. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, viewers, but it's true. I'm sorry. Truth hurts, facts hurt. Get over it. Um, and so, I was fighting for it to be true because, again, it's not in my best interest for this to be wrong. Because I'll say I'm kind of a prideful person. I don't like to be wrong. And I don't think anyone really likes to be wrong and to be duped. But, you know, she started, falling away, you know, fading as it were. She was I would say a PMO, right?
yeah.
As you would say, physically and mentally out. So she
Yeah,
was like that
exactly.
for a long time because I was still in, right? And she was treading very carefully with me because I was still fighting for it to be true. And then eventually she just couldn't take it anymore. She's like, how many more lies, how many more testimonies, how many more, you know, red flags can I really take? And then her and the kids left.
Yeah,
And I remember she was in Zion, which is the Kingdom Hall in Jehovah's Witnesses case. And she's like, I'm done. I'm done. Um, and so she asked me to drive her back, and we lived about 30 minutes from the place. And we were driving back, and I was trying to convince her, no, it's okay. Like, um, we can figure this out. Like, it's the truth. Like, just give it time. God will reveal something. I was trying to make up any excuse of the book to not get her to leave. And then we got home, and I remember she was like, are you coming with us? And that was the hardest thing I've ever heard in my life. You know,
yeah,
are you coming with us? Are you coming with me, your wife, and your 3 beautiful children?
yeah,
Or are you going to go back to the Korean, overlords, the Korean Doomsday cult?
yeah.
And
So she
I
gave you
just,
the choice, the
I just remember,
crossroads.
yeah. And I just remember, that tore me apart. And in that moment, I went back to the cult.
Okay.
Um, and I remember, uh, driving off and I remember seeing my family just staring at me in the rearview mirror. I was just driving, and I remember seeing them in the rearview mirror, and just tears just started coming down my face. You know, tears just started coming down my face. I was broken because I felt like at that moment my body was a prison. My heart wanted to be with my wife and kids,
Yeah.
but my brain wouldn't
Yeah.
let me because I was still like, no, it's the true church. It's God's
Yeah.
organization. If I forsake God's organization, I'm going to burn in hell with them.
Exactly.
Um, and
Yeah.
so but in my heart, I'm like, I need to be with my family. I need to be with my kids. I need to be with them, you know? And that whole drive, 30 minutes back to the cult, I was just dead inside. I was crying. I was weeping, because it's not
Yeah.
just leaving an organization. These cults, when you leave, it's not just leaving an organization. You're leaving
No.
life
No.
itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're leaving a
Everything
community.
you thought, everything you thought was true. You're leaving the actual truth
Yeah,
and
you're
the
leaving.
possibility of dying,
Yeah, you're
basically.
cutting off life, right?
Yeah.
You're cutting off your
Exactly.
life.
It's
It's
like a
because
big
people,
vein.
yeah, because people are like, well, why don't you just leave? Because you're
Yeah.
leaving
It's
life.
not like that. It's not absolutely not like that.
No,
No. It's so it has been quite a slow process for you a little bit. You
yeah,
know.
and fortunately, that wasn't the end. But I
No.
remember keeping that service, right? Because my wife and kids were there. I remember all I knew was because my wife was the one that got me in, right? She was the one that
Yeah.
actually led me to be baptized and join this organization. And so for years, it was just me and her, and then we had kids, and it was me, her, and the kids.
Yeah.
And it was our thing. This was our life. This was our livelihood. It wasn't just a church, right? You can't think of cults as just being a simple church. They're not. It's
No.
it's the people in there live it. That is their life.
Yeah.
To leave means
Yeah.
death. And
Exactly.
in my mind, I had to think, well, my wife and kids are basically dead then, at this moment. And I
Yeah.
remember sitting in the service, just, I don't even remember what was said. I don't remember, like, I wasn't singing. I was just in my mind, I was just dead. I was broken. I was lethargic, catatonic.
Yeah.
And then eventually my fight or flight response kicked in. I kind of just pushed that down, and I was like, well, that's her decision. I got to just get used to it. And then so I kept going. I kept going, and her and the kids weren't there, and that was tearing me apart because I felt like the church, not that anybody said, divorce your wife or separate family or something like that, but I knew from hearing other stories, and I knew how the church functioned, that, you know, there was a stigma about her.
Yeah.
When you leave, there's a stigma about you, right? You're tainted, you're used goods.
Yeah, exactly.
And
But then shunning is also a thing that they are doing when
yeah,
you are well seen with or like outside of the church or out of sight of the cult, doing other
yeah,
things and maybe
yeah.
being
And
against it now.
she wasn't quite shunned yet, because again, they were worried about me, right? Because if they would have shunned her, then they were afraid that would have woke me up to it and been like, oh, what? And that, they treaded very carefully while I was still in.
Yeah,
um and to make a long story short, the final straw, and this was something that, there was things that eating at me the whole time, where it's like, clearly there was lies. However I wanted to justify them in my brain, I could not deny that there was clearly lies, clearly deception, clearly things had been manipulated. And
yeah,
I remember my wife telling me, and that's the whole inspiration of me starting my YouTube channel, was she said, I don't remember her exact words, but the premise was, how do you know, basically, how do you know if there's truth out there if you're not willing to divorce the lie first? Because,
yeah,
and she
yeah,
told me, she's like, well, even if there was truth out there, you still believe this. So I would say, they didn't shun my wife right off the bat because they wanted me to obviously not see the red flags of, because at that point I did know that once you left this organization, you were cut off, because I had seen it before. When people left the organization, they were cut off. Whether they were demon possessed or they were slanderers or whatever the case was, you were very demonized and very looked down upon and shunned essentially when you left. And that's what I was afraid of happening to my family. And
Yeah.
so they didn't do that right off the bat with my wife because again, I was still in. And it all I just remember seeing and hearing all the red flags and really coming to grips with the reality of the situation. It took months for me to finally get the courage to step away. And stepping
Yeah.
away isn't a one and done either. I stopped keeping services little by little, kind of fading. I was kind of a fader, if you will. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I still studied with them. They still come. They came and visited me at my work, and then they also I would go to their church. It was this little house, at least in my city. It was a little house, and I would sit down with them. We would study, and I remember asking the leader questions, like biblical questions that he couldn't answer. And I know any WMSCOG member will be like, "No, he answered them. You just didn't like the answer." It's like, well, that's true because it was a non-answer. Um,
Oh, yeah.
it's like you can if you have a significant other and you can ask them, "Oh, why did you cheat on me?" And then they give you an answer, you know, and you're just like, the answer could be something like, "Well, you didn't give me enough attention," and then you get mad at them because that's a terrible answer. It's a terrible excuse.
Yeah.
And then your spouse is like, "Oh, I gave you an answer. You just don't like it. That you're the problem." It's like, no, you
Yeah.
did something. You started this. You did the wrong. Like Anyway, so that's kind of how they go about that. In my opinion, is they give you terrible answers and like, well, you just didn't like the answer. It's like, yeah, because it was a crap answer. It doesn't justify anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I started asking them questions. I met with them a few times for about a month after I actually stepped away. And they were actually the ones that stopped contacting me. I said, I will always study. I will always talk. I will always be
Yeah.
available. But they're
Yeah.
the ones that actually cut me off, and
Yeah.
shunned me. And one of my good friends that I was friends with for almost 10 years, he was like, even though you left, like, I'm still going to talk to you. I'm still going to call you. We can still hang out. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to hurt your faith because I know there's a stigma around people that leave.
Yeah.
And so we were like, yeah, I won't talk to you about the church unless you ask me, then I will. But if you don't ask, I won't tell.
Yeah.
And so, but then about a week later, he got talked to by one of the leaders and was like, hey, we're not going to talk to him anymore. We're not going to talk to Adam anymore. And so he called me and he's like, hey, they told me I'm not going to talk to you and I'm going to respect their wishes and this and that and the other. Haven't heard from him. It's been probably a year and a half since I've
Okay.
heard from him.
Yeah.
So
That's
the
when
shunning
you
is
left.
real, but they have the audacity to be like, we don't shun people. We don't forbid people from talking to you. We don't forbid, it's like you can you can clearly see it, it's a lie. They do
Yeah.
forbid people from talking to me. It's very clear, but these cults will just lie out in the open without even blushing about the dumbest things like clearly they do shun, they do block, they do forbid people from talking to me. It's a no, like I was part of the organization, guys. Like I know how it works. I'm not stupid, regardless of what your mother God tells you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, so the shunning is real. I've been completely shunned by all my friends and spiritual family. And so is anybody else that's left and spoken out. It just comes with the territory. But it is very much alive and well in the Whimscog, I would say.
Is there one last thing you would like to say to people that are in the Whimscog Church, are experiencing being in a cult, and having trouble finding a way for themselves to survive the experience or find a way out, maybe, or whatever?
Yeah, a couple of things. First thing is if you're expecting it to be painless, it won't be. If you're trying to find an out and you're trying to get out of a cult, plan on it being extremely painful and extremely hard because it is. There's no way
Mm.
around that, unfortunately. Um, Granted, some have better times than others, but there is still pain, there is still suffering, there is still things to overcome and go through once leaving. So don't think it's going to be a sunshine and rainbows type deal. It will be thunderstorms, it will be rocky seas, but there is sunshine and rainbows on the other side, but you have to go through that first. But in this case, the grass is greener on the other side. You might not see it, you might not feel it, you might not think it, which I was in that same darkness before where I felt like I was just in an abyss and there is no way to get out of it. I felt like a dead man walking. I felt like I had no hope for heaven. I felt like I had no hope for even anything. Like I was completely depressed, defeated, and just an empty shell of myself. So you will go through that and you will feel that. But I can tell you at the end of the day, in time, if you give it time, there is light at the end of the tunnel. The grass is greener. It will get better. I have gone through the same thing you're going through, and I know countless other people who are going through or have gone through the same thing you're going through, regardless of cult, regardless of denomination. It happens, and you're not alone. Plenty of people have gone through it. It's you're not. It's nothing new. Unfortunately, I wish it was, but it's nothing new. You are going to go through it. For those that are on the fence, whether it be Jehovah's Witnesses, whether it be WMSCOG, whether it be Shincheonji, another Korean cult, whether it be any of the vast denominations of cults, I would say the truth stands up to scrutiny. So why are you afraid of researching? In fact, don't be afraid of being wrong. Don't be afraid of finding things, because if you find something, it just means it's false. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like, Thomas Edison, he didn't invent the light bulb right away, right? It took him thousands upon thousands of tries to finally invent the light bulb. But every time it didn't work, he wasn't afraid of it because it just showed him what didn't work. And it pointed him in the direction of what does work. So you can take that same approach here. Don't be afraid of research. Don't be afraid of history, facts, and logic and your conscience. If you're indeed in the truth, no matter what you do, no matter what you research, you will come to the conclusion if your organization is the truth. You will come right back to it no matter how much research you do. Because if the facts are the facts and the truth is the truth, and your organization is said true organization, you will come right back to it. But at the end of the day, if you do it, if you do research and you don't come back to that organization, don't be afraid. Don't be worried about it. Don't be scared. It's a mechanism. Like doubt is a mechanism to make sure you're in the truth. Did you know that? Because if you don't doubt, you're not going to grow. If you don't doubt, doubt is a useful tool that God gives us to double check ourselves to make sure we are in the truth. We are in the faith. Doubt is not sin. Doubt is not a bad thing. Doubt makes us human. Doubt is what puts us in the truth, because if we doubt and we research and we're in the truth, guess what? We're going to go right back and be stronger. But if you doubt and you research and you come to find out, hey, this is a false organization, guess what? Now you can find what's true. Now you can find now you can come and find the true religion, which, in my opinion, based off all my research, I still am Christian. I mean, as far as denomination, don't really care, but I'm still Christian. I still believe in Jesus. But the point is, don't be afraid to research, because if whatever is true, it will stand up to it will stand up to scrutiny, no matter how much it is. If somebody comes to me and has this mountain of evidence saying Christianity isn't true, Jesus isn't true, etc., and it's fact, it is what it is. Truth is truth. You know, I've yet to see that, but my point is, don't be afraid of facts. Don't be afraid of truth, because at the end of the day, the truth is what matters. And if your organization is true, no matter how much research, you'll come back to it. So don't be afraid to doubt. Doubt isn't Satan's whispers. Doubt isn't the demons. It's you trying to make sure you're in the truth. It's a useful tool to check if you're in a cult or not. That's what I would say.
Okay. Thank you so much, Adam. That was beautiful. Thank you for talking to the people out here, our viewers, my viewers, your viewers on your channel, Finding the Alternative. Go check it out. Also, our conversation and all the other conversations about ex-cult members and his own experience. He's also talking about his own experience. Thank you so much for being here and joining me on my channel. People, like and subscribe to this channel, and also Adam's. Go check it out once again. Well, I leave you with this. I'm gonna say one last thing that I always say, and that is peace.